Have you ever had one of those days where it just seems like a whole lot of problems seem to hit you just one after the other? Well, that's the way this week has been for me. And to be honest, I think I need to hear this week's lesson more than you do. But stay tuned. We're going to talk about focusing on Jesus instead of on our problems. Hello, welcome to this week's lesson. I'm Brian Vermeer, and today we're going to look at the account of Jesus walking on the water. And this has become kind of a major pop culture thing for Jesus. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like button. Please share these with your friends. And if you can at all, please support me on Patreon. You'll see the web address for that at the end of the video. All right. Jesus walking on the water. This is again, very popular thing that people seem to think about Jesus. It's almost like they think he did it all the time. Truth is, he only did it once, and that was to teach the disciples an important lesson. But still, it's something that the world tends to think about a lot when they talk about Jesus. Just this week, I saw on Facebook, someone had made a video of a swim meet. And you see the swimmers lined up at the starting blocks, and there's one man standing on a block wearing a robe obviously designed to look like Jesus. And when the starter gun goes off, everyone dives into the water except this one man who just runs across the top of the surface of the water across the pool and easily wins the race. But even in the popular musical Jesus Christ Superstar, one of the things that Herod the Great sings to Jesus is, prove to me you're no fool, walk across my swimming pool. This is just something that people think about a lot when they think about Jesus. But again, the truth is, it's a serious account, and it's something that Jesus did only once. And he did it to teach the disciples an important lesson. And we're going to talk about what that lesson is here. We're in Matthew chapter 14. And this takes place right after the feeding of the 5,000. If you remember, Jesus was teaching, and it says 5,000 men came to him. Now, whether that men refers to total people or just men, there's some who like to say that the 5,000 was just the men. And if you include the women and children, there could easily have been 12, 15,000 people there. We don't know. We just know it was a whole lot of people. And when Jesus asked the disciples to feed the people, because they'd been with him a long time and he knew they must be getting hungry, all they could find was one little boy who had 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus miraculously multiplied that to make enough food to feed all of the people. I've heard some liberal scholars try to say, no, it wasn't really a miracle. What it was when the crowd saw this little boy being generous, they all decided to share too. No, it says that the food was multiplied and the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of remnants. And so there was plenty of food to eat. Jesus did a miracle in feeding these people. And that's we know that because of the reaction of the people the next day. But when that is over, Jesus is going to send the crowd home. And that's where we pick up our reading in Matthew chapter 14. Let's look at verses 22 to 27. It says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. After dismissing the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Well into the night he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat was already some distance from land, battered by the waves, because the wind was against them. Jesus came toward them walking on the sea very early in the morning. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. Immediately Jesus spoke to them. Have courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. So it says immediately, that is immediately, after, the feeding of the people, after they'd gathered up all the food. He told the disciples to get into the boat. There were 2 boats there. And he told the disciples to get into a boat and go on across the Sea of Galilee. They were on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus said, go on across to the other side and I'll meet you over there. And there was still one boat left, so they thought, okay, he'll just take the other boat and come, a little bit later after he, dismisses the crowd. But it says Jesus dismissed the crowd, and then he went up on a mountain all by himself to pray. We see Jesus doing this quite a bit. Whenever Jesus really wanted to pray, he would go off by himself and do it. And this is accordance with what he taught. Prayer is a private thing, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with public prayer. We need to pray in public, and we need to pray in church, at least in public, to set an example for the other people, sometimes to teach other people how to pray. But Jesus, when he really had needs, he would go off by himself, because prayer is a private communication between you and God. And when you're by yourself, you're more likely to really open yourself up and let him know what it is you really need. If I'm praying in church, if I'm called upon to pray in church, I'm not going to mention every single little, detailed problem that I've got. I'm not going to mention my innermost thoughts and desires, while other people are listening. It's none of their business. But it is God's business, and sometimes we do need to make a point to pray alone by ourselves, so that we can open ourselves up to God. Remember, Jesus said, God knows what you want. God knows what you need. But he waits for you to ask, because asking shows dependence on him. Just like as a parent, I know when my daughter was real little, I knew what she wanted. I knew what she needed. But there were times I would wait for her to ask me for it, simply to show that she could trust me to provide what she needed, and to teach her, if you need something, ask for it, because sometimes people don't know. So, it says, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and well into the night he was there alone. So Jesus was up there for quite a bit of the night. He was up there, for a fairly long time, probably longer than the disciples were expecting. But meanwhile, it says, the boat was already some distance away from land. They had sailed this boat out into the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and they were obviously further away than walking distance. They were in the deep water area, but it was being battered by the waves. Now, it doesn't say that there was really a storm or anything, but it does say the wind was against them. They're trying to sail against the wind. Apparently, it's a fairly strong wind, because it's creating these huge waves, and these waves are hitting the boat. It doesn't specifically say it was raining or anything, but the waves are hitting the boat. If you've been in a small boat and on a rough sea, those boats, can rock, really bad. And you feel like you're in danger of capsizing at any time. And this is the way the disciples felt. They were afraid. But it says Jesus came toward them walking on the sea very early in the morning. Another account says it was the fourth watch, which is about 3 in the morning, I believe. So Jesus has been up most of the night praying, and then he, instead of taking the boat across, he just starts walking across the Sea of Galilee. And it's early in the morning, still a bit before sunrise, maybe, an hour or two before sunrise. And the disciples see this man coming toward them. Apparently it's light. Again, it doesn't specifically say it was raining or cloudy or anything. It just says there was a strong wind. So there may have been, starting to get glimpses of daylight, or something, but they could see him coming. There may have been a bright moon or something. They could see this man coming. Now, the disciples are smart. They're intelligent. They know people can't walk on the water. So what do they think? They think it's a ghost. Now, I want to be the first to tell you, there are no such thing as ghosts. If you are referring to the spirit of a dead person coming back to earth and appearing to people, no, that does not happen. That only happened once in the Bible, and Even at that time, when Samuel appeared to Saul, when the witch of Endor called him up, Samuel told Saul, I'm not supposed to be doing this. Ghosts are not a real thing. However, I do want you to know demons can impersonate people. So, I'm not saying that no one's ever seen something that they thought was a ghost. But whatever they saw, it was not actually the spirit of the dead person. At the worst, it was a demon impersonating the person, trying to get you to believe, trying to get you to take an interest in spiritism and an interest in the occult and in conjuring the dead. This is something that God has expressly forbidden us to do. We are not to try calling after the dead, because all you're doing is opening yourself up to the demonic world and inviting the demons to come and entertain you. And they might do that for a while, and then when they're through with you, you'll wish you had never started. So that's something just to completely stay away from. Ghosts don't exist. When the person is dead, they're dead. Their spirit is either in Sheol or it's in heaven with God waiting on its resurrected body. So they thought it was a ghost. And it says they cried out in fear. Because the ghosts, like I said, demons can impersonate dead people, and that is something that you do need to be afraid of. But Jesus speaks to them, and notice what he says. He says, have courage, it is I, don't be afraid. I want to focus on this word, or this statement, it is I. In the original Greek, Matthew used the words ego eimi. And that may not mean much to you, but that's very important, because there's also an account in the book of John when Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and they're talking about Abraham, and they're talking about being Abraham's descendants. And Jesus is trying to tell them that he's greater than Abraham, and that if they really were Abraham's descendants, they'd be following him. And he makes a statement. He says, before Abraham was, I am. And they picked up stones to try to stone him. And Jesus said, why are you stoning me? And they said, because you're making yourself to be God. When Jesus said, I am, he's invoking the divine name of God, Yahweh in the Hebrew, which means I am. Well, in Greek, in John, where that account is, when he says I am, that's translated ego eimi. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong when they try to translate it, I have been. That's completely wrong. It means I am. And that's the same words that Jesus uses here. So you could really say Jesus is saying, have courage, I am. And when he says that, he's using the personal name of God. He is calling himself God. Don't be afraid of ghosts, because you've got God. So you don't have a need to be afraid. All right, so the disciples see Jesus coming on the water. Jesus has identified himself, said who he is. So how are the disciples going to react to this? Let's look at verses 28 through 30. Lord, if it's you, Peter answered him, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come. And climbing out of the boat, Peter started walking on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. So Jesus says, don't be afraid, it's me. And Peter said, well, Master, if it is you, a little bit of doubt there. He didn't say since it's you, he said if it's you. Then command me to come to you on the water. In other words, if you're really Jesus, then you've got the power not just to walk on the water by yourself, but you've got the power to let me walk on the water too. Peter had faith. Peter knew Jesus could do amazing things through the power of God. So Jesus says, well, come on then. And it says, climbing out of the boat. So here we see the faith of Peter. Peter trusted Jesus enough to actually get out of the boat. Now, he may have still been a little trepidatious, you might say. When he put his foot over the edge of the boat, he probably kind of tapped to make sure that the water was solid enough to stand on, to make sure his foot didn't sink down through. But he believed it was Jesus. So he was able to walk on the water toward Jesus. When we have faith in Christ, we can do amazing things. That is, we can do whatever it is that Jesus needs us to do. I've said this many times. Jesus is never going to tell you to do something that you can't do. If he tells you to do something, he will provide whatever you need to be able to do it, even if it's something miraculous. And yes, I do believe miracles can still occur today. I'm not saying that all the preachers you see on TV healing the people, no, I know a lot of that is fakery, made up, but I believe miracles can happen. And I believe if he wants you to do one, he'll give you the ability to do one. But let's look at the focus that I want to get to here. It says he started walking on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid. When he took his eyes off of Jesus and looked down at the water and saw the waves and saw the wind, the thought occurred to him, people can't walk on water. And immediately, he just sank down into the water. He lost his faith. Why? Because instead of focusing on Jesus, he was focusing on his problems. And I want to confess, I've been guilty of that this week myself. Our car is in the shop. It's been there for a couple of weeks. The mechanic, who's a good friend of mine, I tried to fix it myself, which was probably my first mistake. Turns out the problem wasn't what the guys at the auto parts store said it was when they checked. So I called a friend of mine who's a mechanic. He took it. He tried to get it. He ordered the parts. They sent him the wrong parts. So it's taking a lot longer to get the car fixed than I thought it would. So that's something I've had worried on my mind. We've had several other things go on. My daughter called from college last night. She had an allergic reaction and had to go to an emergency care facility. You can see anxiety already building up with me. I suffer from anxiety. I'm on medication for it. But several things have just hit us all at once in the past week or two. And I about had a breakdown, simply because I've been focusing on my problems more than on Jesus. My wife has had to remind me, Jesus will take care of us. Jesus will provide what we need. I've also been trying to fill out my income taxes, and I found out that my wife, with her new job, doesn't make enough for them to withhold taxes. So we're having to actually pay some tax this year instead of getting a refund. So yeah, just several things, hitting us all at once. And here I go again, focusing on my problems, when I need to be focusing on Jesus. And I need to be praying to Jesus. Like Peter, Lord, save me. Jesus, help me with these problems. Now, I'm not teaching prosperity gospel at all. I'm not saying that whatever you pray for, Jesus is going to answer it the way you want it to. I'm not saying that if I just pray to Jesus now for $1 million, he'll give it to me. It'd be very nice if he would, but I'm not saying that he's going to just because I ask for it. I'm not saying if you have enough faith, Jesus is going to make you healthy, wealthy, and wise. I'm saying Jesus will see you through your problems. He will help you out. He will give you a comfort. He won't solve your problems for you necessarily. Sometimes he might. He still wants us to do the work. But he can give us a peace of mind that we can't get anywhere else. And he can help us to stay calm. He can help us to stay relaxed. And he can help us take care of our problems. If we keep focused on him and not focused on our problems. Let's finish up and look at verses 31 to 33. It says, immediately Jesus reached out his hand, caught hold of him, and said to him, you of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those in the boat worshipped him and said, truly you are the Son of God. Jesus reaches out his hand, grabs Peter, pulls him back up. Now that Jesus has a hold of him, Peter's able to walk on the water again. Sometimes we need that. Sometimes we just need Jesus to carry us. And we just need to ask him, save me, hold on to me, take me with you. But when we ask Jesus to take us with him, we need to remember we're going to go where he wants to go. And it may not be where we were wanting to go. It may not be what we were planning. When you follow Jesus, you let Jesus lead, and you follow him wherever he decides to go. Well, he takes Peter into the boat. After getting on to him a little bit, he calls Peter a man of little faith. And he knows Peter has a lot of faith. But he also knew Peter doubted there for a bit. And that's what caused the problem. They get into the boat. And immediately the wind ceases. The wind dies down. The waves stop. And the disciples say, truly you are the Son of God. You have power over nature. Why? Because Jesus created nature. Jesus created the wind and the sea. And the Creator is always greater than the created. The Creator can do what he wants with the created. So the point Jesus is trying to make here is we're going to have problems. That's part of life. We live in a broken world. We live in a world that's been tainted by sin. Ever since Adam ate from the tree, we have problems. And Jesus said, you're going to have problems. But Jesus has overcome the world. And Jesus says we can overcome the world. But we need to do it by keeping our eyes on Jesus and not on our problems. So if you're having problems right now, pray to God. Pray that he'll take the problems away. But if he doesn't, pray that he will see you through the problems and he will help you to take care of the problems. And then be ready to go wherever he takes you. Even if it's not where you think you ought to be going. But you have to take that step of faith. You have to step out of the boat. And once you step out of the boat, you have to keep your eyes on him. That's the point he wants to make here. That's why he walked on the water. And I'll see you next week.